Jim, look, we have gone through this kind of stuff before. We're going to go through this obviously again. Did the city handle this particularly poorly this time? Why were you raising this as an issue?
No, I think it's not just the city, and I don't think it's just Montreal. I'm just like everyone. You wake up, and first of all, I got to deal with the Humidex, and it's going to be hot. And a lot of folks are working right now. They're doing the commute. You listen to the traffic reports every morning. Oh yeah, but because of the wildfires out west, we got the air quality is among the worst in the planet. And if your power goes out, you're kind of poop out of luck because without your air conditioning, you're looking at maybe 100 degrees, whatever. It's worse if you're an older person, if you don't have any kind of a support system there. I don't want to give a sermon on climate change. That horse has left the stable. It's over. It's happening, and the weather is going to go nowhere but worse. But I find it intriguing that we have had, especially in Montreal, we have had to adapt ourselves not just to predictable violent storms and high winds and heavy rainfalls, but we've had to adapt to the fact that, everything's going to flood. And yes, I was hopping up and down mad at the city of Montreal, but let's give credit where credit's due, Aaron. The provincial transport department with its it's kind of like their Lego kit of road building. And this is hardly new. I remember when the brand new Lackady Circle, I remember when it first rained and the whole thing flooded, like the first rainfall. And that wasn't even the big rainfalls we have now. But the fact is, why does everything flood? Well, apparently, we were discovering there are a lot of, how can I put it, there are a lot of undulations on the island of Montreal, Aaron. En français, c'est des cuvettes. There's like dips, and when it rains a lot, those things get covered up. Now, I ain't no engineer. I ain't no Leonardo da Vinci, but I figure if you've got a cuvette on a road, you want to have an extra large égout, a sewer. But apparently the sewers can't handle the increased capacity, which kind of makes you wonder what were the norms that were being used when these things were being built. Because I tell you, if we go back to like '87 with the other big, when that infamous day in July when the Jacare flooded. We've been in a different territory now for, my God, almost 50 years. So what the heck is going on here? But I just think for someone just waking up in the morning, remember when summer used to be like a heat wave? Oh, yeah, and there'll be a big storm, and that was it. And then you go on vacation, you try and relax. But now it's like you wake up in the morning, you listen to the news, and it's like, okay, I've got the worst air quality index. Hey, gee, are we going to have an asteroid shower today, or is it just going to be like, just a regular heat wave? Because I don't know what to do anymore. But I'm kind of joking here, but man, it is kind of crazy when all the things that we are expected to deal with in a very kind of narrow window. It really is kind of daunting, especially when you figure, maybe 20 years ago, Aaron, 30 years ago, these things were considered isolated incidents. The storm of the century, the rainfall of the century. Now it's the rainfall of last week. Kind of crazy. And when you have people, politicians saying, "Well, we're doing the best that we can." Oh, and we're going to have more parks and sponge parks and to soak up the rain. I'm thinking, I'm not really sure about that one. It's kind of like the equivalent of coming out with a roll of paper towels and saying, "Don't worry, everything's going to be okay."
Yeah. Or give everyone a bucket. You're expected, when you're on duty on your own corner, you're the one expected out there to catch all the water. Yeah. By the way, did I get the song right, Jim?
Absolutely, okay, sure. And you know what? I got to tell you, that thing has been covered a zillion times.
Yeah.
I have a real favorite. B.B. King does a real kick-ass version of that song. But I got to tell you, nothing tops the original, which is what she played, which is a Lovin' Spoonful from 1966, my friend.
Look at you. All right. Well, Jim, I just want to make sure I had the right one. Look, I want to play this clip. We talked to Colton Prail earlier today. So Mark Carney finally addressing media today, right? House of Commons getting back together and talked about, because we haven't heard a whole lot here, about these tariffs and what's going to happen. Yeah. And he said this.
I expect that the discussions will intensify between now and the end of the month, and we'll be working hard on that. At the same time, we need to recognize that the commercial landscape globally has changed. It's changed in a fundamental manner, and we will continue to focus on what we can most control, which is building a strong Canadian economy, and that's part of what we'll be discussing.
Okay, kind of hard to hear over the protester in the back screaming whatever he was saying. I have no idea what that was about. But there you go.
When I first heard the clip from Brian, I said it's really, really good because like our trade negotiations with the U.S., there's a lunatic screaming in the background, right? So it's really marvelous. But here's the thing. As we hear Mark Carney say this, he's saying, look, you know what? We're probably going to wind up with a deal, but please, and he's obviously managing expectations. He's saying, please, we're going to have some kind of tariff that will be a part of our final agreement with the U.S. And what's crazy is he's saying this at about the same time that Angus Reid, I don't know if you saw the survey that came out today, during the campaign, the idea was Mark Carney is the guy who's going to hold the line, elbows up. We're going to show those Americans a thing or two. And now 2/3 of Canadians think they're ready to go, as they used to say on Coach's Corner, right? You want to go, we'll go. And they countermeasures, retaliatory tariffs, really, really stick it to the Americans, take a hard line with them. And you really have to wonder at this point whether those people who have been sort of stoked up, and justifiably so, are going to turn around and there'll be some kind of backlash against Carney for having suggested that maybe, we'll have a new way of doing things and we're going to show these Americans what's going on, and then to turn around weeks later and say, look, for the time being, we're going to have to deal with these tariffs. There's nothing we can do. And that's always the problem. When you're kind of like whipping people up, you have to know when to, hit the brakes. Will he be able to walk away from this? I have a funny feeling. I'm getting a vibe off of Mark Carney. Not as intense as the one that I got off of Trudeau back in the day, but it's the one I refer to repeatedly on the show as dumb, stupid, lucky. And I think that Mark Carney will probably benefit from this. He'll benefit from the benefit of the doubt, let's put it that way, that Canadians are going to give him, and say, listen, let's try and get through this. But it just goes to show you, Aaron, no matter who you are, no matter how clever you think you are, and whether it's 2025 or 1825 or 1625, a mob is a mob is a mob, and you got to be real careful with how many torches and pitchforks you hand out, and just with exactly what you're calling upon that mob today, because you never know which way they're going to go.
It's almost in this whole process, and when we talked to Colton Prayle, the reporter, said, Canada's self-imposed July 21st deadline is, of course, now off the book, so it is August 1st. You kind of wonder, and I know this came up a couple of times, talking about this stuff before there's actually a deal reached doesn't seem to be very productive, right? There are people working behind the scenes to try to get a deal done with his economic team. I think there's a Donald Trump quote today saying, we're negotiating with Canada, and what he always says, and we think it's going very, very well. Yeah. So is it because people are forcing, we want to have an answer of some kind, even we know that there's a self-imposed deadline here? What's the ruch?
I think it's because Captain Wingnut south of the border keeps saying things every other day. He may say one sane thing and 25 insane things. So right now we haven't heard, for the time being, any more mentions of the 51st state, but we are still allowing, fentanyl is just tsunamiing into the U.S. From Canada. If you believe Donald Trump, we are ripping off Americans left, right, and center. And the thing that I really find sickening, and as loathsome as I find Donald Trump, the fact that nobody, not a single person in the entire United States of America is standing up and calling BS on this obvious BS, that to me, more than anything else, makes me individually prepared to cut Mark Carney some slack, because let's face it, Trump is being allowed to get away with this. We all know it's BS. We all know it's not true. We all know it's blackmail. We all know it is art of the deal. Is more like art of throwing a brick through your window, okay? But the fact that nobody in the U.S. has got the guts to look this guy in the face and say, stop driving my country off a cliff. Now, is it because he's promised what all Americans worship more than anything else, which is a tax break? Is it because they get the impression they're getting that he's being allowed to get away with this? I don't know. But I got to tell you, in the meantime, I think above and beyond, no matter who's talking to you, even me, everyone just take a deep breath and don't go hard one way or the other. When you're dealing with Donald Trump, when you're dealing with the U.S. in its current condition, things can literally change, not from day to day, but as we did see on the show, from hour to hour. Yeah. So, you can't turn around and say, well, hey, B and C is going to happen. We have this deadline here. No, we don't. We've got the latest ravings from a guy who is clearly making it up as he goes along, but isn't really sure where exactly he is as he goes along. So that's where we are. One of the biggest, the most powerful economy on the planet is being run by someone who, quite frankly, isn't quite sure what day of the week it is, and that is a very, very difficult situation to find ourselves in.
Jim, have you seen the cover of the new New York magazine?
Not yet.
It is a picture of a very angry-looking Canadian beaver choking the American national, the bald eagle.
I caught a glimpse of that. Yeah.
And the headline says, "You have no idea how furious the Canadians are."
We are.
So, and we're going to have the author, by the way, who wrote that story. It's quite a piece, by the way, coming up after the 5:30 news. But you kind of wonder if this is what it's going to take to wake up some Americans who don't really know or have a good understanding of what exactly is going on.
Well, but the thing that gets me in all of this is even that cover and that idea that for some reason we have been a bunch of good-natured zombies for decades until Donald Trump came. That's not at all true. I remember when I was a kid, my dad would have his friends over. They'd be knocking back a few beers in the backyard. And what were they complaining about? Were they complaining about the government? No, they were complaining about Americans. Yeah. They couldn't stand Americans. And American BS and they're this and blah, 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 blah. So, you know what? Please spare me the idea that we have suddenly discovered our voice when it comes to criticizing Americans. It's just that the volume has gone back to pre-1970 levels, my friends. And this is a challenge that also faces Mark Carney. I hope he's able to sort of harness that anger and that energy because, as I said before, we don't know from day to day what new outrage Donald Trump is going to pull out of his hat.
And that's the truth. All right, Jim, thank you. Appreciate it.
Matt.